All right, good morning. This is my recap and GM reflections video on my first experience with Jonathan Hicks' Those Dark Places, industrial science fiction role playing. Fantastic. Um, this wasn't so much, um, again, veterans who have played different games, different game systems, can read a book like this and quickly glean from the work what the game system and the experience, if you've had a similar experience, is going to be. What makes this interesting to me, with number one, it's industrial science fiction, which I really dig, and I rarely run and rarely have ever run. As far as my background, my 40 years of gaming, 30, whatever. I had a long hiatus there in my 20s, up to 30 something. Fantastic. So I had prepared, I wasn't certain how I wanted to do this, so I prepared 4 scenarios. And actually all scenarios were based on the number of players that would be there. I had a 1-player scenario, 2-player scenario, David and Dell, I assumed. So I figured I had a good idea how what kind of scenario I was going to do for David and Dell. I had a 3-person scenario and I had a 4-person scenario. I didn't know if somebody else would join us. Wasn't certain if you just don't know in my group. I don't know how many people are in the group, but I make an open invite and leave it for people to let me know if they want to join or if they pop in. And Dell, only shortly before launch did I log on, and I saw that Dell's son Jory was going to join us, and so immediately I was quickly went to my index cards. I don't prep a lot. This is just the way I am. I'm not a big prepper. I might prep, but I might prep scene points depending on the quality of the game, or of course, if it's a hex crawl or a sandbox game, I've got all of my charts and tables in front of me. If it's something I've prepared or heavily, anticipate kind of, I won't say, I guess linear thing, that I kind of prepare a little more maybe. But with this, I literally had an index card for the scenarios and what that generally, and then from that we were going to find out through play what happens. So that meant quickly I grabbed up my index card. I just quickly jotted down a cheat sheet of notes that I needed to remind myself, because I did have 4 index card preps. Set that aside because and quickly before session I did a couple of things. I jotted down what was important about this particular scenario for these three-man game night session. And of course, I also I got on an hour early and I began a countdown for the players that would show up like a computer prompt in Discord at 1700 hours, the vital signs of the doctor, etc. And I just kind of would every 20 minutes or so make a note of the vital signs of the doctor as he was in the wake up procedure, coming out of the long sleep. And I would make subtle computer prompt, because again, in this particular world, this particular one-off setup, they wear ID chips, which are in the book. They talk about ID chips, etc. And the computer tracks on the ship where they're at any given moment, right? And what they might be doing if it's something the computer can track. And so I teased a couple of prompts that the SAM unit, which is the automaton, was doing some kind of strange things. And I didn't know if the players would read any of that on Discord before they logged in. Did not matter. It was completely to get everybody pre-game kind of interested if they were, and to kind of tease out that the SAM unit was doing something, right? Again, that was for the players, and it was alluding to what this particular scenario was. This scenario had 2 report styles. Again, Jonathan Hicks gives reports as examples of the kind of sessions you can run. So I just borrowed a couple of ideas for scenarios, but this particular scenario was really a mix one, in a way, I did two things that I normally don't do. I ran a science fiction game, and I ran a particularly hard science fiction game, and I ran a murder mystery, which is what this was ultimately. They were going to have to deal with figuring out what happened, and when they wake up, but also I don't want to say spoilers, but I'm not certain we'll play. I don't know if the group's going to want to roll into some more with these guys, or start over, or just rotate and try different GMs. Industrial sabotage. So I'm a firm believer in mystery. If the players don't get it, you don't tell them. Let them wonder what the hell, right? You like it to make enough sense by, depending on how the session goes or resolves, etc. They can make some sense of what has transpired. But because I play to find out, I can't always guarantee they're going to ever be able to make sense of something. I don't owe them. A GM does not owe the players in a play to find out game that things make complete sense, and there's mystery there that they can uncover in more sessions, or that they'll just have to live with, right? And so I love that about this style of gaming and this kind of game. But it would hint to, again, not to spoil any future games of the guys, but it might hint to the motivations or why things went the way it went. Okay, so I had a little countdown to the doctor's wake up in my little session setup. And my session 0, I defined the ship a little bit. I defined certain things, and in these subtle session 0 handouts, so to speak, about protocol, I also alluded to certain terms that would exist in this world. The Cartan Corporation, the purge, is the wake up process, and I define that as it's generally a 1-hour process. It can be accelerated, or it can be aborted completely, but there could be dangerous ramifications for waking up a person from long sleep. So that, I did not tell them that. I showed them that. That comes out in play, right? So they didn't know much about that, but they could have gleaned some of those details from the pre-launch stuff I put in Discord. And of course, the first person awakened by protocol is the doctor, and then his job is to wake up everyone else, as a medical officer. So that they knew that it was going to start at least that way. And again, the idea of purge is to purge the astronauts or the crew of the deep sleep effect, to purge them of unconsciousness. So the corporation, or the science of this era, uses the term purge. So it's a purge begins to wake them, and the goal is to purge unconsciousness, the state of hibernation, so to speak. So that's the terminology used by this fiction I've created, this science fiction I've created. Okay. So the doctor awakes on track. Is attended to by the SAM synthetic automaton, Harold. Harold, when he wakes, of course, they have trouble seeing from this long sleep. They have trouble hearing really well. They have their brain, everything has to kind of adjust. However, he adjusts fairly well because he was brought through the proper procedures to wake up. So the doctor's fairly attuned pretty quickly. However, he wakes up to a couple things. One, I defined that if the light on the ship is fluorescent, pure light like this here, that means daytime, and there's no issues anywhere. If the light is a yellow hue, that means there is a system problem somewhere in the ship. There could be multiple system problems, but a yellow hued light throughout the ship means there's a system breakdown or failure somewhere. And if it's red, just straight red, that designates for their biological clocks that on the Earth time, it would be nighttime. And if it's a blinking red, it means there is a serious system failure somewhere in the ship. And this condition will exist. And it's, again, think of industrial science fiction, alien-esque era of science fiction filmmaking to set a tone. I explained to them this is a three decks tall ship. The 2 decks of the ship A and B are one solid ship unit. The B deck is the bridge, living quarters, long sleep quarters, kitchens, bathrooms, etc. The A deck is the bowels of the ship. The top deck is actually the bowels of the ship, housing all the machinery, wires, cables, storage, cold storage, hot storage. And the C deck is the detachable orbital that becomes a survey science vessel that would orbit their target, because they are on a survey mission to survey the moon of a fictional planet, right? Okay. So C-Deck is generally shut down completely unless they're in it to do some science work, or they're in it to do some, they have somebody in the infirmary, etc. But their job, this mission was for them to get to the moon of Zenith System, Planet 1, Zen 1, which is a giant gas planet, and to its satellite, Zen 3 satellite, which is a moon that orbits this gas giant. And they are to create a survey mining science orbital that will orbit that, and it will survey this planet for, hopefully, the corporation riches, right? The mining of to identify high yield mining options for the corporation. So that's their mission. But as we know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into cheap corporations for profit, sending these guys into deep space. There could be a lot of problems with the ship, breakdowns, aging stuff. So anyway, that's the setup. Doctor gets up and about. He quickly observes it's very dark and it's very cold. The temperature, the pre-protocol wake up after long sleep is sub-power subsystems on, life support on for the crew, and of course temperature controls on for the crew. The doctor quickly assesses it's way too cold. Temperature controls clearly aren't working. He's supposed to debrief his Sam. He does a little conversation with Sam. It's dark, so he can only see the yellow floor lights, as the overhead lights and things are not on. So it's very dark. He can't make out details of Sam. He can just talk to Sam. He can see kind of his shadowy figure there, and he can make out the other pods of the sleeping crew members. And he notices the unit number 1 is open, and that particular crew member is not in that unit. So instantly he knows something's amiss. He's supposed to be the first man awake, so he can resuscitate all the other crew members on a schedule, right? He assesses quickly from the side panels of these what condition the other 2 astronauts are in. He assesses, this is David's character, Dr. Barner, Josh Barner. He assesses the open history on the panel and finds out that it is their navigation and helms officer, Grant. And Grant had been awakened 6 months prior in a accelerated purge. So 6 months prior to this moment, someone initiated accelerated purge and brought Grant, awakened Grant 6 months ago, and took him out of this unit. So David's doctors already said, okay, something is really weird. So he tries to ask Sam. He recognizes in the dark, as Sam turns his head, he sees a spark emanate from his left side of his head, and he stutters. The Sam bot is stuttering pretty bad, and that's not normal. However, this is a very old unit. I define this as an early Sam unit, a Sam unit that is more like a doll, not with animatronic face expressions, etc. So pretty obvious it's a robot. I mean, we're not even at the uncanny valley where you would go, wow, that's pretty real. This is like a doll with animated facial expressions with like a rubber skin, but it's meant to look like a young intern, based on the psychological reports that Cartan Corporation did early in their deep space experiments, that human crew members were more comfortable if their automaton was younger and appeared more like a helpmate or an intern than a peer. So that's where this old robot comes from, and it's old. This thing is 53 years beyond its expiration date. So again, we're dealing with a very cheap corporation, and that was to remind them that they may well be dealing with machinery that's malfunctioning. But a spark emanates in the dark from the left side of his face, his cheek. He can't see any more than that, but he should not see internal parts of this Sam, okay? And it stutters badly, okay? But he asks a couple of pointed questions, and Sam denies that there is a 4th crew member. And the doctor then orders him to get back to the front and do some system evaluation. He begins the process of doing a purge, an accelerated purge. Normally, the Cartan Corporation gives 4 hours for recovery for the doctor. before he would begin to bring about the other crew members. Job 1 is to assess life support. Job 2 is to assess his crew members. Job 3 is to make sure that Sam has done all the full power on checks, that the grav engines have stopped, et cetera, et cetera. He kind of gleams all that. But he begins the process of bringing both his crew members around, but he doesn't want to use the accelerator. He just starts the purge, which is a 1 hour window in which they'll wake up naturally, safely. He can accelerate that with a push of a button, or he can literally hit abort and jolt them awake. But being a doctor, he understands that this could create stroke or potential cardiac arrest. So he didn't want to do it. As a doctor, he's going to wake them up early, but he's not going to purge them early. He's going to let them have their normal 1 hour resuscitation. He goes to get dressed as it's cold. He goes into the living quarters, sees all the bunks. And they all have bunks that are units in a wall. They're not like separate rooms, but they have their own locker and their own bed, etc., their own storage, and they're side by side. Port side has 2 crew sleeping spaces, and starboard has 2 sleeping spaces, and they sit side by side. And so he gets dressed. He tries to double up. He wears a couple layers because I explained to them it's very cold, and you've got to get this rectified. Of course, I think recognizes that the glowing yellow, the lights being in the yellow phase. This may be why the lights are yellow, but he's not certain. He investigates Grant's bunk area and discovers that his locker is ajar. He discovers that he spots a blood stain on the locker, or what he thinks is a blood stain. Hard to tell because of the yellow lighting in here, but he knows it's a brown stain. He can see it smudged there on the locker where somebody would grab it to open it, and he can see almost like a print. He also spots this on the bed covering, right? And he's pretty certain it's blood, but he's, obviously it's as far as he knows, it's just an observation and a how do we say, good educated guess, right? He then goes to the bridge to ask Sam a few questions. He orders Sam ultimately he goes to the bridge to do an astronavigation, but he never does it. So David says, I'm going to the bridge to start the protocol astronavigation. Are we where we're supposed to be, etc.? But he gets up there, and Sam, I complicated it because he felt so. Again, this game has what's called success, partial success, or failure. And when he ordered the Herald to go to and begin a process of system checks, etc. up front, he had, I think it was a partial success, so I complicated it, but I saved the complication to when he entered the bridge, and he hears an alarm chime on the computer that Harold's working at, and when he looks over, he sees the alarm on the screen. He can see the thing blink, and he sees him quickly mute the alarm sound emanating from the computer monitor. So he knows now that something's happened. An alarm is chimed, and he's muted it, but he didn't mute it before the doctor heard it and kind of caught a glimpse. And then quickly, the ship goes into a code red, which again the lights turn to the red, and they blink. That's what lets them know it's an alarm and not just nighttime, right? This blinking code red. So again, think this is basically sub-powered ship. Communications and things are on a very binary basis, right? Very simple. This is also, again, old technology, a cheap company. So these aren't the best ways to communicate. You would have to go to computer terminals if you wanted more detailed information, which is exactly what the doctor does. Spins around, pulls it up, and sees that Harold has initiated accelerated purge on both of our sleeping crew members. The doctor asks him point blank, why did you do that? And he doesn't deny it. He says it seemed appropriate. David then orders him to do a diagnostic. Okay. And he leaves him sitting there as he's plugged himself into with a serial cable, and he's in a kind of a meditative state as he's doing this self-diagnostic. The doctor then races back to find a failed strength roll for Dale's character, Talon. His name is Scott Talon. He has a last name too. Talon is his nickname, former military man. So his first name's Scott, second name's Talon, and then he has a third name there. And then of course, we have Jory's playing McAllister, who is our engineer slash science officer slash engineer. And of course, David is the doctor slash liaison officer. And of course, Dale's playing security slash liaisons officer. And their missing crew member was their helm and navigation officer. Okay. Okay. So he races back there just in time to find Talon going into cardiac arrest. He has a couple of options in this situation as he's in the long sleep chamber with an IV, etc. He can administer drugs via this IV here. He can actually start defib or things like that with a push of the button using while he's encased. He describes how one of the reasons he's in this mission now, one of the reasons he's working for Cartan is at some point in his history as a doctor, he trusted automation and it caused a malpractice incident in his career, and that's why he's here now. So he says, I'm not using automation. I literally will hit the abort button. The unit will decompress and pop open, and then he gets in there and literally physically defibs him. Dale makes the roll, a strength check, but he gets the +2 medical crew officer's bonus for his strength check. The doctor can do this. So the doctor does not have to make a roll for this. This is what he does, but he gives his +2 medical officer bonus to Dell's strength check to not suffer, damage here, right? Okay. Zaps him, resuscitates him. He sets up. It was a partial success. Again, I think Dell mentioned there were probably 3 or 4 times that I didn't use partial success. I maybe didn't use partial success by adding complications. However, here's a situation where I absolutely did. I told him he was blind. And because of this purge and aborted purge, his character was going to have trouble seeing for a lot longer than normal. So I did complicate it. I just don't know if he saw it as a complication. There were a couple of others that I later listened back to, and I'm not certain. I gave partial information for partial success on some information checks. I didn't listen back to the whole session, but I really didn't see where I could have provided more instances. But in that situation, I definitely told him and defined that he was going to have trouble seeing, and he continued to have trouble seeing much longer than McAllister, who saw pretty quickly, and the doctor, who's already up and around. He, of course, takes in this, wow, he's bolted out of this, deep sleep. He has been defibbed. He did make the check in a partial success, so he did not suffer a strength damage, but he did have the complication that he would have trouble seeing a lot longer than normal. McAllister was waking normally. As the doctor looked over, he could see his vital signs were elevated, which was normal, but he was coming out properly, and that he would wake up in about a 15 or 20-minute cycle of accelerated purge. So he trusted McAllister was fine. He was able to handle Talon's cardiac arrest. So now we're world building here. I give them a little bit of pre-session stuff. They have the book, which defines what we're doing. I give them detailed pre-session stuff on the world I'm running, the science fiction I'm doing, the place they work, the people they work for. So we did a little world building pre-session, but not a lot. All of this that we're doing now, as I show or tell, and as they experience, we're world building. This becomes canon, right? So they now know what a purge is. They know what the normal purge is. They know what the accelerated purge is. They know what an aborted purge is. They know that could lead to stroke or cardiac arrest. This would all become normal for a campaign, right? In this little world we're building, they begin to understand that this is the depths and the detail we're dealing with. They're up and around. David runs into the living quarters, and everything is linear on this ship. So there's the aft of the ship, and everything is separated by bulkhead doors. And there's 6 sections. There's A1, A2, all the way up to A6. And then there's B1 through B6, and it's linear. There are ladders only in the aft A through C, and there's ladders in the kitchen, and there's ladders in the bridge. So there's ways to access up and down the ship, right? And I told them, think of this as a submarine, not quite as tight, but they use ladders to go up and down. In some areas they have to shimmy, especially in A deck. So I described it. David made a great observation, and I agreed as we were playing. I agreed, as much detail as I was hitting him with, and as much as we weren't hand waving any moment in this. A game that's this simple, system wise, mechanically, I did not hand wave anything, which meant very detail oriented and very much here and now live. So what that meant was it was important that they really understood what was going on around them. And I made one major failure here, even online, as I should have. And David, I don't know if it was a failure, but David made a great observation that I was realizing later, especially as Dell was trying to navigate the ship in a couple of scenes, that they really needed a map of the ship. They needed a chart that at least kind of showed them, the bulkheads and where the stairs, where the ladders would go up and down in the ship, etc. And that would have just given them a frame of reference as to exactly where they are in the ship and where the bulkhead doors are, etc. So in future, if I run a game like this, I will have to provide schematics, which is great. I mean, I have no problem with that, but I have to draw them, hand draw them, and I have to scan them and then upload them. I have no way on my computer of drawing anything remotely tolerable, right? As I don't have any art programs and I'm not an artist in any way. But if I use graph paper, I can draw out schematics and then upload it. So that would be the future. And I've done that for our Simba Room sessions. I've actually, drawn out maps and things and uploaded them for them to see so they could see. It's the kind of thing I do at the table. I might have a map I slide in front of the players so they can just grasp the chamber they're in or something. Okay. But Dave, that was a brilliant feedback from David. And I was feeling that a little bit as I played, but it became very clear in certain situations that it would have helped them quite a bit to be able to understand exactly the ship layout. Okay. So anyway, diagnostics done. He runs in to get blankets for his freezing and sick astronaut. He tells him to stay in bed, runs and gets blankets. And as he enters the living chamber, because it's linear, the main hallway through all of these rooms, you can look right down from the very end of the ship all the way down to the entrance into the bridge. So you could see people working in the kitchen, if the bulkhead doors aren't shut, and none of them are. All the lights are on at this point. Everything in a yellow hues because there is a system failure somewhere, which they're pretty certain is the temperature controls. And he sees, as he runs in this, he sees standing in the doorway of the opposite side of the living quarters, between him and the bridge is Harold, and Harold's just standing there watching him. And he stops. He's arrested. The doctor's like, oh, okay, this is creepy. And he's arrested. And he asks some questions. His stutter is gone. I describe how the side of his face that he can now see in the light is damaged. His head's crushed in. His face, the rubber skin is ripped off. This is where he could see the spark in the darkness. But he can see now that only one side of his face is animated. The other side of his face is shut down. The gleam, the little light in his eye on the left side is out. And he can see as he speaks, only one side of his lips move. It's all animated anyway, but just one side of his head is operating. And he's not stuttering any longer because there's not this malfunction lit up. So he, in his diagnostics, shut down one whole side of his unit, right? His memory unit. And this creates an interesting thing for me because I know Sam's motivation for what he's done, which they're learning as they play. They don't know what's happened, but I know what's going on. He has an agenda. But when the doctor ordered him to do a self-diagnostic, right, he naturally would shut off the broken components, the damaged memory, because at one point he was either hiding information from the doctor or it was broken and inaccessible. But either way, he shuts it off, and instantly that gave me a second android. I really could turn Harold into two androids. One, a mission-driven, agenda-based android that was working on something, and then the diagnostics when he shut that whole side down and certain memories lost and certain things. His speech pattern changed, so I defined that he was speaking differently. He began to use their first names as opposed to how he was very formal and very right. But it allowed me to then now make Harold harmless. He's now just a harmless automaton that doesn't have an agenda, but he can't also help them. He can't remember what's going on, right? So is he hiding this information from them, or is it a damaged brain system, or is it now shut off. But they don't know that, right? So they have no idea that he's now at this point, that side shut off. There is no agenda. It's ultimately going to be what it is, which is a harmless human aid, right? But they don't know that, right? And the doctor's freaked out by it. Anyway, he orders him. Actually, he stays there, and Talon hears this conversation about Grant. And every time they mention the name Grant, again, somewhere in this unit, it has a memory connection, but it doesn't understand it. But it automatically, with its left hand, will reach up and touch its damaged part of its head. Every time he hears the name Grant, I describe how the it'll like touch its damaged part of its head and then return to normal, hoping to cue them that clearly at some point there's some disconnect, but there's enough understanding, but he can't verbally explain why he would know that Grant is tied to his injury. But I was cueing the players that there's a connection, which they're not dumb. They got it, I'm sure. Okay. And again, this was in a more or less, this was going to be a mystery. What happened to Grant? And when they finally discover Grant is gone, it becomes kind of a murder mystery. But yet, there's only really one culprit. The real mystery here is why would Sam do what he did? Okay. Talon gets involved. He begins to get dressed. Again, I describe how he says he can only now just see vaguely edges of lights, etc. He gets really close to Harold, trying to see him, and he can't. Harold doesn't respond to him in any way. But every time he hears the name Grant, he will touch the broken, side of his head. Okay. Talon, being the security officer, immediately locks down. They all step back into the long sleep chamber, and he punches up on the keyboard the security protocol to lock both bulkheads of the living quarters, and locked the Harold, the robot, into the living quarters. And all that's in the living quarters are the bunks, a table for playing poker or having a snack that's bolted to the floor, and of course their lockers, their clothes, but there's nothing else really in there as far as, so they know they can safely lock him in. Now they cannot go through B-Tech and get to the bridge from here, or to the kitchen, or to the bathrooms, etc. from here, because that room is locked off between them. So they would have to go up to A deck and go over it and down into the bridge, or into C deck and over and up. So they can circumvent and get to the bridge in those other areas, but they have to do it from A deck or B deck. They discuss that they've got to get the temperature fixed. Now the doctor is beginning to feel the effects. If the doctor had any serious challenges, it was going to remove his advantages of +2 or +1. As I said, it's starting to affect it. Your so-called is starting to affect your concentration. Your digits are becoming numb. So they decide they better get this temperature thing checked out and fixed. So they have to go up to A deck, where all of these controls are. Sam had debriefed the doctor when he woke him up, when the doctor said, "What's going on with the temperature? Why is it so damn cold in here?" And Sam expressed that there was a system failure in temperature controls in A2. So they knew exactly where the failure was at. Sam debriefed him. So they shimmy up the ladder. They go into A2, the doctor and McAllister. McAllister drops down into the section, and the doctor follows suit. They see that there's been damage to the floor. There's damage to the wall, including damage to the temperature control panel. However, it is not a direct hit on the panel. It looks as if it was struck kind of partially along the panel, but enough to dent the panel completely in. But I said it's not on target enough. It's off target just enough that it looks like it's collateral damage. It wasn't intended to happen. And they're also, the doctor spots blood spots, or what he, again, under this yellow light, perceives as blood spots. But again, it's a yellow tinge to the light. He doesn't have a UV light to check protein or anything, but he's pretty certain these are blood spatters. They then notice on the floor at the far end that there are some boot prints and drag marks through this dried brown blood into the A3 chamber bulkhead, which is shut right now. They can't see in there without opening that door. Talon joins them after he observes through the bulkhead, what's going on. Meanwhile, there are intercoms that they have to be physically pushed. They have to be manually pushed down to talk, and you can target one room or you can target the whole ship. and he pipes up and asks Talon, Scott, why did you lock me in the living quarter? I can't do my job. This is not protocol. So he, every once in a while, he chimes in from the intercom to say to Scott, why won't you let me out of here? Why can't I do my job? And of course, Scott's got him locked down, right? And he's calling him Scott now, first name. Very formal, but very polite, very calm. No hostility, right? He does suffer some confusion once he does his diagnostic check and he shuts down that whole side. He only can recall that the doctor had told him he was damaged on his left side of his face and he needed to do a diagnostic. So he believes the doctor damaged him. And he tells this to Scott Talon when they first have a conversation. He says, the doctor, you would have to ask the doctor why he did this to me. So he's confused getting the information from the doctor about the left side of his face with believing at this point or assuming the doctor did this damage. So Sam literally at this point thinks that the left side of his head is damaged by the doctor, right? Because the doctor is the one who spotted it and ordered it. But when he shuts it all down, that connection is gone. So he connects directly the doctor to his wound, and he tells this to Talon. So again, they're very concerned that it's manipulating them or that it's up to something. But the reality is this is a broken brain connections, right? There's pieces of the memory, et cetera, that are inaccessible. And I described when they would ask him certain questions, it would tilt its head and you could see it was trying to process the question and it wouldn't have the appropriate answer, or it would find an answer that may or may not be appropriate. And again, they may have perceived that as a malfunction. They may have perceived that as manipulation by the robot. It doesn't make any difference. Either way, it's terrifying, right? So it could be terrifying. I reminded, because Talon, that's it. Talon goes to the security locker pretty quick, although he can't see real well. He uses his security chip to open the security. He's the only one on the ship able to open the safe that he knows. He quickly runs his hands across the weapons that are supposed to be there and discovers one of the ballistic pistols is gone. 2 stun guns, 2 pistols, and 1 shotgun. He runs his hands, finds the 2 stun, takes them, and administers them to his crewmates. He takes one of the ballistics and he locks up the shotgun. But he now knows that one of the ballistic pistols was removed from this locker. So somebody had his access, either a chip around his neck, probably not, or I mean, either his security ID card, or somebody else has access that should not have. Okay, so he can glean this. As he shuts the locker, that's where the Sam is standing. Harold's standing right. He shuts the locker and Harold's standing right there and says to him, why are you in the security locker? You don't need weaponry, Scott. What's going on, Scott? And that was when he said, well, come with me. And that's when they locked him in the living quarters. They go up anyway. They discover the panel. McAllister goes to work to repair this. So he takes the panel apart. He sees the conduit tube is so bent from this indention that it must have severed some of the wires in the temperature controls. So he has to cut that pipe and get to work correcting it. I said, you can make a roll to do this quickly, or you can take all the time you want and you'll get it done. It'll just take the time it takes. And he said, I'll just take the time it takes. At this point, I'm here. I'm going to go to work on it. We'll see. Meanwhile, they have an intercom back and forth as he pops up and says, why are you in A2? Scott, why won't you let me help you? Why won't you let me do my job? This is not protocol. And so they have this little back and forth on the intercoms with this android who's in a way taunting them, but innocently, because he's literally meant to help them, right? It's his job. But again, they don't know that, right? Okay. And again, he was rendered in a way harmless because the doctor just said, hey, you need to run a diagnostics. And that allowed me to, in a way, to change his personality by shutting half of them down. And it really created a greater mystery because now he doesn't even have the ability to give them legitimate information, the robot. So they were going to have other means to solve this mystery. It was one of the most, for me, it was one of the most satisfying sessions I've run in a long time. Very, very satisfying. And I don't run murder mystery games. I don't run a lot of mystery stuff. There's always mystery in games, but I don't intentionally run investigative stuff. This is a genre where we can have that. We can have that in any genre, by the way, but this is the perfect kind of genre for these mysteries. They got to figure out why the temperature gauge is broken. They got to figure out, what's that ship on the other side of the moon? It's orbiting. We should investigate that ship should be here. Whatever. It's just all of it's mystery, right? In deep space, when you're in uncharted deep space, so to speak, or partially charted deep space. Okay, they begin the process of repairing the temperature gauge. They get that done, and they investigate where they see a little boot print in this, what they're all now assuming is blood. However, they don't really know, and McAllister suggests it could be oil. And so they open the bulkhead into 3, and they now see that this mark is all the way across A3 into A4 bulkhead, and the A4 bulkheads are closed as well. So they pass through this chamber. This is dry storage. This is where all of the dry storage of like ramen noodles, macaroni, all the dry goods that could be stored for years and years and years, canned food, things like that is in this area. So they have some legitimate, real food, dry storage food, so they don't have to eat the recycled stuff until they run out of all this if they want to. Anyway, they get to A4, and A4 is actually locked. And fortunately, Scott has a security ID, security codes, and he can override the locks, and he opens it. And in this is cold storage. This is where they would store anything that requires refrigeration, particularly medications. There is no meat, things like that. There would be nothing that would spoil on the ship. It's pointless. But this would be cold storage for anything they would need to refrigerate, in particular, medications. And in this cold storage, they see now in the floor what appears to be a large stain where something laid here and bled out and has now been removed. And they also discover the other missing handgun that is underneath the bottom rack of one of the shelving units. And it's been there so long that it's frozen. It's got like frost on it, and they break it loose. And Talon has discovered the missing handgun, and it's been there for a long time. It's coated in like a refrigeration ice. They look about quickly in any of the freezers and storage to see if, oh, well, let's face it, the obvious, a body. Nothing. They also do not discover the pipe that might have been used to, whatever it was, to shatter that unit, or might have caused the wound to Sam. They haven't seen or found that. They then begin the process of saying, okay, they're putting 2 and 2 together that they believe this was Grant. They still haven't found a body. And they decide to go to the bridge and do some investigation there, discover where they're at. And this is where things get, for me, really good. They have not had a real pressure check yet, right? The pressure checks start coming pretty fast and furious as there are certain realizations they uncover in the investigation. They go back to the bridge, and they discover they had been actually in hibernation 6 months longer than they should have been. They discover that they are not in the Zenith system. They do not know where they're at. And this causes a pressure check. The doctor fails the pressure check. He starts to accumulate pressure. Okay. Both McAllister and Talon retain composure. Their pressure level is pretty low. Again, I'm not a big fan of those mechanics in games like this, but boy, was that fun. It was actually brilliant last night. So I actually enjoyed this pressure level thing, right? This is why you have to experience these things more. In reading and in theory, I'm not a fan. But as I experience this, at least from a GM's perspective, right? As I experience this, it does heighten something outside of combat, right? So the great thing about something like a pressure level is we end up accruing a different kind of vulnerability that's not just health, right? Not just hit points. And very cool. Corruption does this, of course, in games like games like Fellowship of the Ring for 5e, and the One Ring has this kind of accruing of the shadow. Corruption in Symbaroum. So they're very, very cool. They give an added vulnerability that isn't just life or death, right? Which is kind of neat, right? Especially if we make those checks truly narratively relevant to the horror or to the expectations they have. So as they uncover some of this information, they begin to put 2 and 2 together. They're making pressure checks in a way to the shock that they were asleep 6 months longer than they should have been. At some point in the voyage, 6 months ago, the ship, the grav engines were shut off, and the ship sat dead for 3 days. They're able to track back all of the SAM ID on the computer logs, because it's the computer logs wherever the chip of the robot or of the astronauts moves, and whatever they may be doing if they access something. So they can go back to the computer logs and see that Sam initiated a purge, and he went and he got Grant. They turn on they go back and they coincide those dates and times with the camera footage from the living quarters, from the bridge, and from the C deck. And they're able to see that the Harold had knocked him into the living quarters as he comes onto screen. And they see that he's wiping a bloody nose, and that's where the blood marks come from the locker. The blood marks come from the bed. So they're now able to say, oh, okay, so this robot smacked him or hit him into, and he bloodied his nose. They see him getting dressed as he picks him up, throws him, and then they see him come on in the bridge. They see that he forces Grant to sit at the navigation computer, and they see that he holds his head and forces him to tap in these coordinates, which probably are where they're at right now, but they don't really know what all went down. And then they're able to track to see that literally an hour before the doctor woke up, or excuse me, 20 minutes before the doctor woke up, this was a pre-session teaser, right? Again, the players may or may not have seen that pre-session, but it's the same entry that they would be reading on the computer that I put in Discord as kind of a mystery. They see that 20 minutes before the doctor was awakened for this session, that Sam goes to A4 and shows up in C. They can see on the computer, on the camera footage recorded, that he's carrying Grant's body, and that he opens the airlock and purges Grant's body into space before before the doctor wakes up and he administers to the doctor the debrief. Okay. So they know that this fight between the two occurred 6 months ago. That's when the damage occurred to his head. They know that the ship was actually, grav engines were actually stopped, that they were stopped for 3 days, that he had used Grant to put in particular navigation units. So it's conceivable that only Grant knew these coordinates, right? If he wouldn't have needed him to type them in himself. So they can begin to put to, but again, there's a great mystery here. Why? What did Grant know? What did Grant? Okay. Now they make another pressure check because they literally know now that Harold not only killed Brian, but only 20 minutes before he woke him up, he disposed of the body, which had sat in cold storage for 6 months, right? Okay. Temperature's on though, right? So they're warming up. McAllister and Talon, they all discuss what are they going to do. And meanwhile, he's pounded on the bulkhead doors a few times. He has flipped on the intercom and he has said, you know, what's going on? Why don't you guys let me out of here? And they decide where are the airlocks. And there's only 2 airlocks. There's a C deck airlock for the orbital that would be used for spacewalks to get out of the unit and spacewalk with spacesuits. And then there's an airlock on A deck that's used in the back aft area where you could eject waste and garbage, or just another airlock. And they know he's in B deck living section, and then there is the long sleep section with a ladder up into A1, and A1 is where the airlock is. So when he chimes on to taunt the group who are now a little shaken, Talon orders him. He says, I can help. Protocol insists I help. Why do you have me locked in here? He keeps asking the same question. And Talon says, yeah, I want your help. I need you to go to A1. So they order him to A1, and the doctor, the only way they can track him, because there's no cameras here, is all of A deck has no cameras at all. It's just the plumbing of the ship. It's the guts of the ship that's actually on the top level, and it's storage. So there are no cameras in A deck at all. But they know the computer will track where his chip shows up, his chip. So the doctor literally reads out to Talon live. He's in the long sleep. Okay, he's now in A1. And Talon orders that they shut down the bulkhead of A2. And when he gets into A1, he tells McAllister, hit that airlock. And they do. But the doctor can't read whether the chip is on the ship or off the ship at this point. And that's because I made the agility check for the automaton to grab the wall and not get sucked out. Sure enough, I rolled a 4. He has 4 agility, 8. So he grabs this bulkhead door. Actually, I rolled a 10 of 6 and his 4 agility. I had also reminded them early when they were at the security locker, when he said something to Harold when Harold was standing at the locker. And he made some comment about his ID chip. I wanted to foreshadow and remind them of what this creature is capable of. And he reaches to grab his ID chip, his dog tag, so to speak, and he does it so fast that Talon can't possibly. He couldn't believe it, and he looks at his chip and then he just lets it go. But he does it in a flash, and this was to remind them that they're dealing with a physically heightened creature. Okay. So they can't confirm whether he's been sucked out of the ship or not. So Talon decides, they needed to create a code red, it's called, which sends the ship into a blinking red alarm. And the only way to do that is to create a dangerous situation for the ship. So they all debated. This is before the airlock, before they opened up the airlock on him. They could not lock the bulkheads down and trigger the airlock from here without a code red situation. So they had to create one. And they went over some options. We could blow a hole in the hull. That would definitely do it. They debated on shutting down the life support, but that's a normal procedure when you go into long sleep. So that would trigger cold red. The doctor is reminded that when a astronaut goes into code red, his ID chip would send a code red alarm to the ship, and you would see it. So they all agree that's the easiest and safest way to create a code red. So Talon crushes his own ID chip under his boot and triggers a code red. This allows them to shut down that bulkhead from here and open the airlock from any given place. So there's no way for them to control these things from the bridge unless there's a code red, right? So this is the situation. So they're able to identify that problem and come up with a solution. But now they know they've opened the airlock. It's still open, but they don't know if Sam is on or off the ship. So they decide they're going to have to make a visual verification through the porthole of airlock A2. But he doesn't want to go there without a suit. So he goes down into the darkness of C. He retrieves a normal pressurized suit, climbs to A, and moves his way through A deck all the way down to A2. Looking through the porthole, he sees now Sam holding on, and it didn't work. So he orders to try to chop him in two or to, crush him. He orders McAllister to shut the airlock, and I make another agility check for him. And again, he ends up being faster than the airlock, and I say he just stands up and looks through the porthole at you, and he's in a helmet with a microphone, and they're on each side of this pole, and he's looking at him. So he says, hit that airlock again. But this time, McAllister hits it, but I said the android can see your lips, and he reads your lips, and you say, open the airlock, and he grabs the door crank. This would be the manual crank to open the hatches. It can also be automated. He grabs it, and they open the airlock, and he's just holding on to it, watching through the porthole. So no matter what he does, he can't get this thing out of the ship. So the doctor says, damn it, just shoot him. And by the way, he retrieved the shotgun from the security locker. And so the doctor's like, damn it, you're going to have to just shoot this guy, which he wouldn't have had to. If this guy had failed either of those checks, it would have been an anticlimactic end to the robot, right? Not end, but off the ship, safely off the ship. But he literally keeps making these agility checks. Unbelievable fun. It's great fun. So they say, we got to time this. You've got to shut the airlock and open A2 so I can shoot this thing. And then we got to shut A2 and open airlock to expel his body. And I said, you're going to have to make a roll here because they can't see him. They only know he doesn't have a chip. So they don't know where he's at on the ship because he crushed his own chip. They know Sam is in A1 at a locked door holding on. The airlock's open. He says, I need you to simultaneously really shut the airlock and open this A2 door so I can get a shot on this guy. And I said, you're going to have to make a roll here to organize this because you can't see a camera. You have no. And Jory, as McAllister says, I'm going to count to 3, Talon. On 3, we do this thing. And because he gave an actual timing mechanism, I waived a die roll. So Jory did not have to make a die roll. He actually created a time that they both would be able to time it. And that lent his +1 engineering, which would have been applied to the roll, to the initiative check for combat with the talent. And again, why do I love simple, flexible games? Because I can say we're going to use the engineer's +1 and add it to Dell's character's initiative check for the impending combat. When he shuts that airlock and opens A2, there's going to be an instant conflict. Because he said, I'm going to give you a countdown, they're both on the exact same timing. So he didn't need to make a roll to trigger everything just right. And it gave Dale's character, Scott Talon, a normal initiative jump with a bonus, but he failed, and the Harold won. And Harold made a melee attack to actually damage and destroy the shotgun. So the actual attack was at the barrel of the gun to crush it. It would have been no damage to on the first round. It would have been no damage, but he would have crushed that shotgun, obliterated its barrel, and then we would have been in a melee with a shotgun club, right? But he missed, and Dale's character, point blank, basically, for all intents and purposes, blows his head off at point blank with his shotgun. Dale describes how it damages him and takes part of his head off, not his whole head, and he falls and flies back into the wall. His milky colored blood everywhere, and Dale scoots away into A2, rolls into A2, and then tells McAllister to shut A2 and eject the body into space, and indeed they do. And that's it. It's over. Session over. Great session. They had some, again, I've run plenty of sessions that have mystery and investigation. I mean, that's what dungeon crawls are, right? If you break dungeon crawls down, the nitty gritty, it is a slow crawl of uncovering mysteries and requiring action to investigate. That's what a dungeon crawl is. I mean, there are many GMs, I think, get it wrong and say it's just a death trap. It's just a place it's a mouse, and put mice in a cage and mice in a maze and murder them. But I've always seen dungeon crawls as about the mystery and about the investigation the players have to actively engage in by doing things. Okay. Anyway, this was just great fun. And their ability, again, what's great about science fiction, depending on the level of technology level, they can use computers, they can use, so they're able to track the computers inboard systems, tracks where those ID chips show up on the ship. It might tell them if they've accessed a particular door or panel, etc. And they use that equipment, and they use those cameras to kind of put together the pieces of what the timeline and what happened. They could not see the actual fight because there's no cameras on A2, but they know from the collateral damage that there was some kind of fight in A2. And you can imagine why it would have occurred versus why he would have just locked him up in cold storage and locked him in. You can imagine why. It doesn't make any difference. This is the thing of a mystery. It doesn't make any difference. All that matters is what the players witness, what the players learn, and what the players do. And that becomes like real life. We don't always know the real details and the reality of we can take evidence and piece together a narrative, but we don't always know exactly why or what. And that was it. I got great feedback from Dell that on those 3 or 4 times that I had partial success, I could have used more complications as opposed to partial information. I think that was valid. I did use complications on a couple of them. I just they like the blindness, why Dell's character was blind longer. And great feedback from David that a schematic of the ship would have been a fantastic detail for them. And that makes complete sense as they're on the ship. They're seeing the layout of the ship. They know the layout of the ship. It would have been nice for the players to feel that exact same level of detail about what they know about the ship, so to speak. Jory made a comment that the tension, interesting observation that many games, you can't tell if the tension comes from the game mechanics or if the tension comes from the story. And he made an observation that there was a point where he knew this was going to come to a conflict of sorts between him and one of the crew and the character, but that was when the tension really ramped up. How is this going to go down? When's it going to go down? Why is it going to go down? And the irony is, had he failed that first agility check when they first opened the airlock, he would have been launched out into space, and that's it, right? There would have been no actual conflict melee attack, but then he made the check to get past the airlock door when they tried to shut it on him, and then he made the Third check, easily. That was set at easy because you could read the lips looking at the portal, because Scott, we described it. They're looking at each other. He's got a helmet on. He's talking in a microphone, and he reads his lips. Open the airlock, so he just grabs the door. So it was an easy check, right? And again, I'm making rolls for the NPCs. Same thing, easy, normal, difficult. I would play this. I would play a campaign in this without question. A simple game does not mean shallow. A simple system does not mean shallow. A simple system does not mean pointless. The fact there is no leveling up for characters does not, I think, relegate it to one-offs or a simple one-session gaming. Matter of fact, they have already accrued 2 years of service because they were in a sleep for 2 years. 2 of their 25 years has been served already. And there's something about this that, can they do their jobs? Can they survive these crazy situations that would occur in space? And can any of them get to retirement, so to speak? I would definitely run something like this long term. Jonathan Hicks, I want to thank Jonathan Hicks for and Osprey for putting together a great product. A beautiful book, simple, well written, great system, and it gives you everything you need to do this thing we did. I just provided them my own world, and I provided greater details. I drilled in as opposed to kind of broad strokes. This is a perfect game for broad strokes. Hey guys, let's play a game of Alien. Let's make a quick where we can just go. And you can do broad strokes of movie type detail, right? Where there are broad strokes of a scene, broad strokes of details. Not worrying, drilling really deep in like the computer console, etc. That could all have been created by players, etc. The doctor or McAllister could have said, "I'm going to the computer. I want to look up the history," and I would not have said no. He could have. The players could well have created this exact same computer paradigm. I needed to have a hint to them. I felt I needed to put a hint to them in the Discord chat of kind of the computer would log these times of when things occur on the ship. And again, I don't know if any of the players actually saw any of that lead up. So for an hour prior to session, as I was getting my scenario of my 3-player scenario organized in my head, I was writing down the doctor's process of waking up, and also the computer logging what Sam was doing at the same time. And if they look back at that, they can see that 19 minutes or 21 minutes before the doctor actually is awake, Sam had ejected something from the airlock in C. So very, very fun. That's it. Great game, great session, great. These guys, we always have great games. I don't know what we're doing next. I believe Joth is next week with Todd. We're going to be playing a Wednesday night Joth, getting back to our long-term Joth campaigns. And then I don't know what we'll rotate. I think Dell's the next Simbaroom session. Plus, we're going to try to rotate some stuff like this, different games, different systems. We might still rotate GMs. We might, find something we do semi long-term, 4 or 5 session stuff. Who knows? But thank you, gentlemen, and everybody out there. Have a great week. And I appreciate you tuning in and hearing about our experiences with those dark places. Bye.